Tomatoes are probably the most fun and interesting crop to grow in the garden. There is so much variation in color, size, flavor, etc. Over the years, I have asked myself, are there uncommon ways to boost tomato production? I have tested many different and unique ways of growing tomatoes. Let's jump into them and see what we find out. To start out, we will see if the popular idea of burying a banana under a tomato plant is actually beneficial, or is it just another garden myth that sounds good but doesn't hold up? Here's what I did. The first thing we did was we pulled back our wood chip mulch and dug a hole with a spade about twice the size of the pot from the tomato plant that we're going to be putting in the ground. Then we grabbed a tomato plant. We decided that the Super Sweet 100 would be a good choice because I already planted a number of Super Sweet 100s in different locations in the garden. Next, we grabbed 2 bananas that were starting to get a bit overripe, and I didn't feel like using these bananas for banana bread, so I thought this might be a good way to use them to try to get the potassium out of them to help our plants. I grabbed the bananas, I broke them into a few pieces, and I put them at the bottom of the hole in hopes that as the season progresses, they would break down and provide a good level of potassium for the plants that hopefully really helps them late in the season. Then I covered the bananas with a couple inches of soil so the roots would have a bit of soil to root into before they got to the bananas. After that, I took my tomato out of the container and put some mycos on it to inoculate it with the mycorrhizal fungi. Next, I backfilled the hole with soil about halfway. I used natural soil and then I watered it in. After that, I added some more natural soil and then watered it in again. I made sure to only use the natural soil because I want to see the kind of effect that the banana would actually have on its own. Lastly, I pulled the wood chip mulch around the plants and stuck my tag in. The reason I thought burying a banana underneath my tomato plant would be beneficial was because I figured as the microorganisms come in and break down that banana over time, it would slowly release some potassium, some phosphorus, and also some calcium. This would help the tomato plant with developing strong stems, developing strong roots, fighting off disease, and also producing more fruit. After that, there's not much else I did besides staking the plant, and I pruned it. And I also sprayed it with neem oil spray one time because I saw a few aphids on the leaves. A little over a month later, on June 26th, the plant was showing a lot of growth and looking super healthy. About a month after that, on July 20th, the plant was loaded with fruit that was starting to ripen, and the stems were super thick and looking really healthy. 10 days later, by July 30th, the first tomatoes were ripening and I began grabbing regular harvests from the plant. It's September now, and here is the tomato plant that me and Tuck buried the banana underneath. Look how well it's still growing and look at the high level of production. Really happy with the way it came out, and me and Tuck thought it would be a decent idea because not only did we have some extra bananas that were like a bit overripe, but also we figured that potassium is so important for overall health of tomatoes, and it works really well to help with disease resistance. So we figured we'd bury that banana. Over time it would decompose in the ground, maybe some of the worms would do some work too, and then that potassium would be bioavailable for the plants to be able to take up as it got later into the season and to be able to help it to grow deeper into the fall. I think it came out pretty well. One thing to note is that this is Super Sweet 100, so this is a relatively disease resistant variety, so I'm not saying that adding some potassium or like putting a banana underneath your plant is going to make your plants completely disease resistant. I'm just saying that we thought it was a cool idea and we think it helped a little bit. Here's some of the tomatoes. Let's grab one to actually get a taste of it, see if it tastes like bananas. Just kidding. Absolutely delicious. One of my favorite all-time varieties. And like I mentioned earlier, we planted a number of Super Sweet 100s throughout the garden. That's one of the reasons I chose to put this plant into the ground. So right next to us here, this is another Super Sweet 100 that I didn't put the banana underneath. You can see it isn't doing necessarily as well as the one I put the banana underneath, but I'm not saying that the banana is the reason for that. One thing is for whatever reason, it seems like this Super Sweet 100, it just wasn't as good of seed. It wasn't as good of like a phenotype as the other one. I can even tell how the color on all these tomatoes was a little like light at the top. So even though this was the same variety, it didn't do as good as this one. As you can see, we grew some huge tomato plants with a high level of production when I buried the banana underneath the tomato plant. I don't think that burying that banana was the sole reason that the plant produced so well, because there were a lot of other plants around it that grew well also. I don't think the banana hurt though, and I actually do think it helped the plant later in the season as the season just kept progressing. The reason for that is, as the season went on, that banana acted like a slow release fertilizer. It first released potassium into the soil, which helps the plant build stronger stems. It helps the plant fight off disease, and it helps with overall fruit production. The second thing it released was phosphorus. Phosphorus is important for healthy root development, and it's helpful to encourage more flowering. That flowering will ultimately lead to more fruiting, which is great. Calcium was also released into the soil, which is important for our tomato plants to prevent blossom end rot, which is an issue with, a lot of us tomato growers end up running into at some point. And also, the breaking down of that banana added organic matter to the soil. What that does is it helps improve soil structure, and then it also helps draw in a lot of those microbiological organisms. Another option would be to just grab a blender and then take your rotting bananas and the peels, toss them in the blender, mix it up like that, and then add a little bit of water. I didn't want to do this because I wanted a whole banana to be buried. This way it would slowly break down over time and continually feed the plant as the season progressed. But making a banana smoothie and pouring that around your plants is a good option. Just make sure you don't overdo it. Another thing is you could just take banana peels after you've eaten the banana and bury that underneath your tomato plants. That will work well. Or if it's not time to plant tomatoes and you've got some rotting bananas, you could just take those and toss them into your compost pile. That's probably going to be the easiest way to get the nutrition from the banana and use that into your garden. Overall, this was a fun experiment. I think it went well. I would consider it a success, but I wouldn't say it would ever be worth it to go buy bananas and then to bury them under your plants. If you already have rotting bananas that you're not using, or just banana peels, you should definitely take those and bury them under your plants. But don't go buy them. I mean, that would be a complete waste, because when it comes down to it, using the bananas, it wasn't as beneficial as just using something like an all-purpose fertilizer and using that to help grow your plants. But it was a lot of fun to be able to take something like a rotting banana and convert that into delicious tomatoes. Let's jump into an experiment where I took one tomato plant, cut it in half, and then grafted that onto a completely different tomato plant. I felt like a doctor or something out there. Here's what I did. Back on May 5th, I chose a young tomato plant as my rootstock. Then I made a horizontal cut in the plant with a razor blade. Next, I took my razor blade and made a vertical cut in the stem so I could take another variety of tomato and insert that into the cut. This style of grafting is known as a cleft graft. Then I took my second tomato plant and made a horizontal cut in that. After that, I shortened the stem just a little bit more and then shaved the sides of the bottom of the stem so they came to like a point or an arrow. This way I have more points of contact for the graft. Next, I inserted the top variety into the rootstock plant and used a grafting clip to hold them both together. Then I put some water in my tray and covered the tray with a tall plastic dome with ventilation slots in the top. To start off, I kept those ventilation slots closed to keep the humidity nice and high. Next, I moved the tray into a location in my house that stays very warm, about 70 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and no light. At this point, the top variety doesn't have any roots, so we want to put it in a dark, warm, humid environment to give it some time to be able to attach itself, the top variety, to the bottom rootstock. After about 4 days or so, I slowly started to introduce the plants to a bit of weak light, and I opened the slots in the top of the plastic dome. A little over a week after grafting, the plants were ready to move into the greenhouse. I let them grow in there for a little while until they were ready to be transplanted into the garden. You might be thinking, James, what's the point of grafting 2 different tomatoes together? Well, as we know, there are thousands of varieties of tomatoes out there. Some of them have really good flavor and look beautiful, but they don't have good disease resistance. Other ones have good disease resistance, but they don't look that great and maybe the flavor isn't that great. When we graft tomatoes together, we can take a variety that has good disease resistance, use that as the rootstock, and then take another variety that is more disease prone and graft the disease prone one onto the one that has good disease resistance. Then we're left with a tomato that has good disease resistance, but also we're growing 2 different tomatoes on the same plant. Here we've got a tomato with 2 different varieties on it. I grafted one variety onto another. So we've got the red zebra and the blue cream berry. So this was a blue cream berry rootstock and I grafted the red zebra to it. You can see right where the clip is. I'll take it off here. So what I did was, where I grafted it, I left a spot where we can still, it was like by a crotch, so the original rootstock variety is still coming up. So we're gonna have 2 different varieties of tomato on this one plant, the blue cream berry and then the red zebra. So let's get this actually into the ground. So we're gonna plant it right into the wood chips. Just gonna dig back the wood chips, because we never plant into wood chips. The wood chips are just a mulch. We plant into the soil. So let's dig it into this. Look at that soil. Nice worms in here too. Nice sized worms. Mixing some Happy Frog soil. We're gonna take our grafted tomato here. Again, we've got the grafted variety up top there, and then we've got the rootstock variety, which is the blue cream berry. So this should be pretty cool, getting both varieties in one. Mycosan. Get this buried. Take some of our natural soil and just around the base, tuck it in, and then we're gonna take some of our Happy Frog on top and water this in. There we go, all watered in. And then we didn't bury the graft. I'm gonna move some of our wood chips in, not much though, because we don't wanna restrict the blue cream berry one. That's good just like that. And then we'll get our stake in. I'm gonna put a stake in. Nice bamboo stake. Then we're just gonna tie this top variety to the stake so that the wind doesn't do too much damage on it. Take our clip. Just gonna clip it. There we go. A few weeks after transplanting, the graft was healed over well and the plant took really nicely to its new home. As the season progressed and the plants grew, I treated them like every other tomato plant. I pruned out all the suckers and tied the plants to the bamboo stake. At this point, the plants were just growing beautifully. By the time July 1st had hit, the plant had blown up in size and was headed towards production. I just continued to prune and tie the tomato to the stake. It's August 6th now and the plant is absolutely loaded with 2 different varieties of tomato on the same plant. Come down here, look at this. 2 varieties ripe and ready, same plant. I mean, look how amazing that is. Absolutely beautiful. When you track down, you can see, here is where I grafted the red zebra variety to the blue cream berry. You just track up and that's where the red zebras are. One thing that has blown me away is how well the red zebra variety has grown on this plant compared to a couple different locations where I planted the same variety. It seems like the blue cream berry variety has really good disease resistance, and since I use that as a rootstock, it greatly benefited the red zebra variety too. Grafting tomatoes onto hardy rootstocks will greatly help with disease resistance, especially soil-borne diseases. For example, say you have a variety of tomato that's susceptible to verticillium wilt. What you could do is you could graft that variety onto a rootstock that is resistant to that issue. This way, you don't have to deal with the problem, you could simply avoid it. So by grafting tomatoes, what we can do is we could grow varieties of tomatoes that we never could before simply by grafting them onto resistant rootstocks. I think it's pretty incredible. In my scenario, the red zebra variety greatly benefited from the disease-resistant characteristics of the blue cream berry. If you want to graft tomatoes for disease resistance, there are actually some varieties that are specific rootstocks for disease resistance. One of them is the Estamino. This is a good one because not only is it bred for disease resistance, I'll list a lot of the diseases that it will help with right here to help avoid, but also it is one that focuses a lot of its energy on the production of fruit. So just because you're using it as a rootstock, that won't diminish your level of fruiting. It will only help, and it will also add a lot of disease resistant characteristics. I originally wanted to graft 2 tomatoes together for a few reasons. The first one was simply because I thought it would be a lot of fun to do and that it would be interesting, like connecting 2 different plants together, seeing if they grow. The whole idea of it just seemed like a blast to me. Also, I thought it would be cool that if you only had enough space to grow 1 tomato plant, what could you do to make it so you could get 2 different varieties? I thought, hey, if we graft 2 tomatoes together, we could have both of those varieties grow in the same one location. So I thought that was pretty unique. By the end of it, there were so many additional added benefits that I didn't even take into account as much as I possibly should have, like that added disease resistance, the improved overall plant health, the plant's ability to better fight off some of the environmental conditions, The ability of the grafting to help the plant produce for a longer duration of time, which happened because the plant continued to do well late into the season. So overall, I think it was really successful. I'm super happy with how the whole thing came out, and this is one that I definitely think you guys should try your hand at. Grafting tomatoes works incredible, and just the ability to grow some susceptible varieties that you couldn't have before, the fact that you can do that with the power of grafting, to me, that's incredible. That was another enjoyable experiment. The anticipation of what will happen, to me, that's like the most fun part about the whole thing. The next experiment started with a question. It's when I first began gardening. I would be at the food store grabbing some stuff. I would look over, see the tomatoes, and they didn't look great, but they would still make me think. I'd be like, what if I bought one of those, sliced the top off, buried that in the ground? Would that regrow into more tomato plants? So I figured one day, let's try it out. For the tomato, I sliced off the top to see if the tomato would root from the stem. But I also left some seeds inside to see if the seeds would sprout and grow some new tomato plants. Then I just buried the top of the tomato, leaving the green growth on the top of the tomato out of the soil. There has been an exciting development with the tomatoes though. A few of the seeds sprouted and look super healthy. No growth from the green part of the tomato, but the seedlings look fantastic. The tomato seedlings were looking great. A few more of them sprouted and were getting a bit cluttered. So I decided to thin a few of them out and just left the 2 healthiest seedlings to grow. The tomatoes were looking really nice. The seedlings I left after pruning were really big and the color of the leaves was beautiful. The stem of the tomato didn't root like I thought it could, but that was okay because so many of the seeds sprouted. I was actually surprised with how many popped up out of the ground. In the past, when I wanted to save tomato seeds, what I would do is I would take those seeds and I would either ferment them or I would take the seed and rub it in a paper towel to remove the sprout inhibitor. But when I took that tomato, just sliced it and buried it in the soil, I was very surprised and actually kind of blown away with how well the germination was when all I did was just drop that into the ground and let it go. Check out the tomato. You saw the tomato, all it was just a single top of a tomato with some seeds in it. I pressed it into the ground right there, look. And all of these tomatoes plants started to shoot up and they're loaded with fruit now. Look at this. Nice looking fruit. There's a fruit on the back that's starting to ripen. The time has finally come to harvest some of these tomatoes. All we did was just take the top of that tomato with some seeds in it, press it into the ground, and now look at all the tomatoes we have here. Look at these over here. Look how beautiful these are. Looking really nice. We're gonna harvest these and then try one or two, but just come up and look at the production here. Really nice. It's September 11th today. One of the reasons that these tomatoes have been ready so late is because I did actually plant them late. Look at this over here. I planted these essentially from seed in June, so 99 days ago. Let's grab some of these tomatoes though and actually taste them. Pretty nice looking tomatoes. Come in here, you can see like this is exactly where I put the top in. All the seeds just sprouted and shot up right from here. And then we had a couple plants that like just dominated and took over, and the production on them has been pretty nice. Let's actually taste one or two of these. This one looks really ripe. Let's taste this thing and see if it has a good flavor to it. Pretty good, relatively mild. Not the best flavor, definitely not as good as some of my tomatoes that I grow, like the Super Sweet 100 or anything like the Sun Gold Cherry, but still not bad for a regrowing one from the store. Let's try this other one because it looks different. One of these bigger ones here. These are more like egg shaped, you'll notice. Let's try this one. Looks pretty good. Juicy, a bit sourish, not super sweet. I think it could have got a little bit riper, but again, I mean, and that's insane. You could just take tomatoes from the store, stick them in the ground, and get your own tomato plants from it. A little bit more time has passed and more tomatoes are ripening up. Look at all of them. We're gonna grab some more of them to add to our harvest. We've got some nice ones over here. Slice these off, not too shabby. And we've got some ones back here. We'll grab most of these. One's looking good here. We'll grab this one up here. So the harvest's a little later than some of the other ones, but I did plant it from seed. The fact that we're still getting, man, this thing's really holding on to me, this asparagus. The fact that we're still getting some more harvest from this regrown tomato, I think is just, I think it's really awesome. It's been an incredibly fun experiment to do, and it's more successful than I thought it was going to be, especially when it comes to the tomatoes. Let's get these ones. This one here. And you can see there's still more up there that are ready to be harvested. The plants are starting to slow down a little bit. That's because it's getting cool here. Overall, a very nice harvest, especially when you include it with the other ones we've grabbed. Some of these tomatoes, it looks like the varieties are almost a little bit different. That's what's gonna happen when you regrow a tomato that's like a hybrid. And typically when you plant a tomato that was a hybrid, the seed, the offspring isn't as good as the one before. That's just what's gonna happen. You're not gonna get those good traits from each parent. So, like I tried before, the flavor wasn't amazing, but regardless, you could get tomatoes from the store, do what I did, cut the top off with a few seeds in it, stick it in the ground, and then be harvesting your own fresh tomatoes from it. Incredible. Overall, I would consider this experiment a huge success as well. Even though the tomatoes didn't taste that great, it still proved to us that it's actually really easy to regrow tomatoes that you get from the food store. One thing though is I wouldn't really try to regrow hybrid tomatoes, but if you could find a place locally that sells either open pollinated tomatoes or heirloom tomatoes that you could buy, that would be fantastic. Then all you have to do is slice into them, drop it in the ground, and walk away. For our next experiment, the idea came from an old tomato product that I would see and think, there's no way that works. I'd be like, that doesn't even make any sense. The idea seems sort of like upside down to me, but I figured let's try it out, so that's what I did. To start off, back on May 8th, we took a food-safe 5-gallon bucket and drilled a 2-inch diameter hole at the bottom. This way we could take the tomato and slide it upside down through that hole. Then we hung the bucket from a temporary hook and took a disease-resistant cherry tomato that I started from seed. I chose the Super Sweet 100, took that plant, removed it from a 6-inch pot, turned it upside down, and gently slid the top part of the plant through the hole in the bottom of the bucket. After that, I took a bit of my soil and placed it around the base of my bucket. Next, I took some mycose and sprinkled it around the base of my roots. What this does is inoculates the plants with the mycorrhizal association. Then I filled my bucket up with soil to about 70% full. Next, I watered the plant in and noticed some water draining out the bottom after I watered it in. After my tomato was finished being transplanted, I took the plant and hung it from the ridge beam in my greenhouse. I did this because it was still a little bit too cold out to leave the plant outside for like 24 hours a day, and I also thought bringing it into the greenhouse would help with the transplant. 11 days later, the plant had fully transitioned to its new home and it was showing good signs of growth. You can already see how the plant was starting to push its way up towards the light. It's been a few weeks since I showed you it last, the upside down hanging tomato. It's growing beautifully. Look at this, we've even got some flowers on this side here. So what we're gonna do is bring it out into the garden now. So I'm gonna set up an area and we're just gonna hang this thing, so I'll bring you along for it. So I decided it would be fun for the hanging tomato if I hung it from a peach tree. You can see all the peaches we have on the trees, but they'll soon be off, so as this tomato gets heavier, the peaches will be all finished. So what I'm gonna do is just wrap it around this tree. That looks good. I don't wanna use anything that's too thin to cut into the tree. So I think that looks good like that. Next, I'm gonna go grab my hanging tomato out of the greenhouse and then we're gonna hang this thing up. Look at that thing, it's crazy. Looks cool. Yeah, look at this thing. It's just growing absolutely beautifully. Let's get it hung up though. What I did was I just twisted the cord at the top a little bit so it wouldn't spin off of me. Now I'm gonna get the height that I want. Just gonna twist it a few times so it doesn't go anywhere. There we go, all hung up. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna run a string that goes from up here down to the bucket, and then I'm gonna run another string that goes from the bottom of the bucket down. I'm gonna do this so that I can stabilize the pot so it doesn't blow in the wind too much, and I'm also gonna grow the tomato up the string. You'll see it as it starts to come together, but look how odd this looks with nothing growing in the top up here. So you can peek up in here, see the soil, see the variety, but there's no plant growing in there. It looks funny. The plant's coming out the bottom. Next, I'm gonna drop a brick underneath my tomato just like this, and I'm gonna take this tomato twine, really strong string, and I'm gonna tie it down to the brick. from the bucket. You'll see here. I'm gonna take one end, tie it to the bucket here. I get a piece long enough. I'm gonna take this string, go underneath my brick, and then back up the other side. Then I'm gonna tie it back to the other side. I'm gonna make sure it's nice and tight so that it's kind of helping to hold the bucket in place. So what that's gonna do is help keep my bucket from swaying too much. It'll sway a little bit, but not much. Then I'll also be able to take my tomato, and one top I'm gonna actually grow down, and I can clip it just like that. And then I can take another one of my tops and start growing it up. So we're gonna have the tomato growing in both directions. Next, I'm gonna take one more string, tie it to the top here. And I'm just gonna tie this to the bucket, and I'll explain to you why I'm doing that. So I tied this string to the top of the bucket. This way, as this tomato starts growing up, I'm gonna continue to clip this. This thing is gonna keep growing up this string. Then as it grows tall enough, we're gonna have it grow up to this string. So there's gonna be tomato growing from this bucket all the way down, as you're seeing. And then there's also gonna be some of the tops growing up. So they're gonna be kind of growing in both directions. So it should be pretty interesting and just awesome to see tomato growing upside down, growing in both directions. 5 days later, after the plant had fully transitioned to its new home, it was already starting to show some signs of the leaves yellowing. So to compensate for this, what I did was make a top dressing consisting of some potting mix and half a cup of an all-purpose fertilizer. I mixed those together, put it on top of the plant, and then watered in. After that, I put on top of the bucket some diced leaf mulch just to help hold some of that moisture in. It's August 19th now, and to my surprise, the plant is growing really, really well. This thing would be absolutely loaded with tomatoes if the birds and the squirrels weren't stealing them just as they ripen. You can see how the plant is growing in 2 different directions. One part is growing down, just like this, and almost like sprawling along the ground, and then the other part is growing up towards the tree. And the bucket is in the center. I think it looks pretty unique and cool, and it's just something you don't see with tomatoes usually. So you'll notice what I didn't do is I didn't just let all the tomato grow out the bottom and hang down and sprawl along the ground like this, because tomatoes are vines and they like when they can attach to something, hold on to that, and then produce the fruit from that. So if you move up here, you'll notice what I did was I ran some strings so that I could tie the tomato to the string. This way it had some good support, could grow vertically up the tree, and not all the tomato was just hanging from the bottom and sprawling on the ground. There's a few things to note when growing a tomato like this. The first one is that it's going to take more water and more fertilizer than a standard tomato plant would. The reason for this is because every time you water this plant, the water just drains out the bottom. What this does is every time you water, you're essentially just flushing the nutrition and the fertilizer out of that soil because it just kind of drains out the bottom with the water. The second thing you need to take into account is since the water drains so quickly out the bottom, the soil has a tough time getting fully saturated. This means on really hot days, you have to come out every single morning and water this plant. If not, then at the hot part of the day, the plant will wilt really badly. It's really important that you only water this plant in the mornings and not at night. The reason for this is as we track down, every time we water, the water drips down onto the plant and gets on the leaves. So you do not want these leaves staying wet for a long period of time. If you do it at night, they'll stay wet for a long period of time and you're just increasing your chances of getting bad fungal issues. I wouldn't suggest hanging your tomato in a super sunny location, or that's just going to cause the soil in the bucket to dry out even quicker. So I'm happy I hung my tomato in a section that gets some filtered sunlight, so on the hottest part of the day, the plant has a little bit of relief. The third thing to note is it's vitally important if you want to grow a tomato like this that you choose a super disease resistant and hardy tomato. The reason for this is every time you water the plant, the water is going to drip out the bottom and it's going to get the plant wet and the leaves wet. So if you grow a variety that's susceptible to fungal issues, that's going to be a huge problem and it's going to make it much harder for you. So I suggest growing a variety like the Super Sweet 100 like I'm doing here, or something like the Cherry Bomb, a variety that has great disease resistance. Overall, growing the upside down hanging tomato was a lot of fun and a super enlightening experience. I have some things that I would change for next year that I'm going to share with you at the end, and I think this design could work a lot better. Overall though, just in this actual design, how I did it, I don't think this is the best way to grow a tomato. Right here is another Super Sweet 100 variety that I grew with the same soil, same fertilizer, and in a bucket as well, but I planted this one not upside down. This plant is doing a lot better, as you can see. And a few things about it is that it also didn't take as much water or fertilizer to grow it. Because every time I water this plant, when you come down here, when I water, all the excess water that has the fertilizer and stuff in it goes to the bottom, drains, and then stays in this tray, and then the plant is able to just suck that water back up. So we're not wasting any fertilizer or any water with this design. If you look through the plant, you'll notice we got some good tomatoes from it. Again, if the squirrels and birds didn't steal a lot of them, there would be even more. There's some down here. I'm gonna grab some fresh ripe ones, some that they left. But I would definitely do this again, and I'm going to do it again. I'm just going to switch the design a little bit, and I'll show you how I'm gonna switch it right here. First, let me taste one of these. There's a reason they call it the Super Sweet 100. It tastes like little pieces of candy. Incredibly good. And who would have thought, you know, candy hanging from a bucket upside down. It's just such a unique way to grow, and I'm actually shocked how well it did. Let me show you how I could fix it and how this would grow even better for next year. So what I'm going to do next year is I'm going to take the 5-gallon bucket just like I did last year. This time I'm going to drill a bit smaller of a hole, like a 1-inch hole probably, and then transplant the tomato when it's younger. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take like a 1 or 2-inch PVC, whatever thickness of the hole I drilled. Then I'm going to cut a piece about, say, this height, and I'm going to glue it to the bottom. So that's the hole. This way, when I water, there's a section where the water can pool up and sit in there before it starts to drain out the bottom. This way the plant has some excess moisture to pull as it starts to get hot out, and all that fertilizer and water just doesn't drain out the bottom. So I think a design like this would make all the difference, and it'll make it so we could grow tomatoes upside down in buckets beautifully. This experiment was another one that surprised me. The tomato plant grew a lot better and was more productive than I thought it would have been, although it wasn't really practical to grow it like this. I could have made some adjustments, like I mentioned earlier, to allow the whole thing to do better and the plant to grow better. But let's be honest, growing a tomato out the bottom of a bucket that's hanging, it just doesn't seem to make that much sense. Ultimately, I could have done some things different to solve some of the issues that I had, but I mean, why do I even have to spend the time to try to solve those issues? If you just take a tomato, grow it in just a standard bucket, and then put it on a patio or something, it's a way better way to do it. You don't have to worry about a lot of the issues that came from hanging the tomato upside down, and you're still gonna get great production. So should you try it? I mean, if you want to try it just for fun, then go for it. But if you just want to get some fresh tomatoes to eat, then I want to do the hanging tomato upside down. To me, it seems all a little bit upside down and backwards. We buried bananas underneath our tomato plants, and they seem to help with late production and also disease resistance. So what happens when we bury fish or sardines under our tomato plants? Well, I tried that out too, and here's how it went. Earlier this spring, just a few months ago, I decided to run an experiment where I took 2 tomato plants, both the same age and the same variety, cherry bomb, and decided to plant them a few feet apart. The only difference was, with one tomato, I decided to bury a can of sardines underneath it, while the other one, I didn't. For the first cherry bomb tomato, I just pulled the wood chip mulch back with a rake until I got to the soil level. Then, I dug out a section of soil with a small shovel about 3 times the width of the cup that I was planting from, and about, I'd say 9 or 10 inches deep. Next, I opened the can of sardines, and for this, I use the sardines that have no salt added, and I tried to get ones with as much of the skin and fish parts as possible. I also made sure it was sardines that were in water and not in oil, wild caught and natural. And after that, I then put the whole can of sardines at the bottom of the hole. You can see them down there. After that, I covered the sardines with about 4 inches of my natural sandy soil, getting it to the right height so it would be perfect for the tomato to set in, and still burying the stem a little bit. After that, I watered the area in so the soil and the sardines had some moisture. Then I put a bit more natural soil on top of that, then some of my homemade soil to finish it off, just so the tomato would have a better time adjusting to its new home. After that, I sprinkled some mycose onto the roots, inoculating the plant with the Mycorrhizal Association. Then transplanted the tomato into its spot and backfilled with natural soil. After that, I top dressed with a little of my own homemade compost and covered that with some wood chip mulch, then watered the whole thing in and it was done. I never had an issue with any cats or raccoons digging up my sardines. I know some of you will mention that, but there was never a problem. That might be because some of the thick wood chip mulch that I have on the ground here, and also because I have the whole property fenced in relatively well. For the other cherry bomb tomato plant, I followed the same exact procedure, moving the wood chips till I got to the natural soil, then digging into that natural soil and planting into the natural soil, then top dressing with my homemade soil. Except I did not bury sardines underneath this one. This plan acts more as the control for the other one. Now, a few months have passed and let's check out the result of our little experiment. Here are the plants right here. And the reason I planted 2 plants of the same variety, one with sardines under it and one without, is so that I could have a control, which is this plant right here. Essentially, it's just a plant that I can base my results off of. So this is with no additional fertilizer or fish or anything, while this one on the side here is with the additional sardines. So I did this because I don't want to just say that, oh, this works or it doesn't work. I want to have something to be able to compare my results against. So that's why I have the 2 planted right here. The reason I chose sardines as my fertilizer is because fish itself is always like known to be a great fertilizer. The Native Americans have used it, you know, a long time ago when they used to bury fish underneath corn. And I thought sardines would be good because it's so easily, readily, and accessible, because most people probably just have them like in their cupboards inside, as opposed to something like Manhattan or like a fish head and going to get that somewhere. I figured, you know, a lot of people just have the sardines, so it's readily accessible. Also, it doesn't like stink as much as some of the fish heads and stuff do, because it's like something that we would eat, the sardines. It doesn't have as much as an off-putting smell in my opinion, and it's a little cleaner to work with. So I thought sardines would be a good substitute for something like a regular fish or a fish head. Here they are. Let's check the plants out in detail and see if there's a considerable difference, and we'll decide whether or not it's actually worth it to bury sardines under your tomato plants. As we step back a little bit, we'll notice that there isn't a huge difference in size, although the one with sardines that I planted under it, which is right here, seems to have overall more growth. You'll notice it's a little, it's taller than the other one, and at the top we have a double top here. So without that double top, this thing would be another foot tall probably. The level of production is really good. As we come down, we'll notice most of this fruit is actually on the back side as opposed to the front side like the other one, but loaded with fruit, excellent. And this tomato did really good through the hot part of the year. We'll notice the ripe fruit down here. And some of the other tomato plants, as we slowly move up, after we look at these tomatoes, you'll notice that we have a lot of full sets here. Some of the other plants had sets where they didn't fruit because it got so hot during the middle part of the summer, but this thing looks like it has just excelled along, and it's got an amazing amount of fruit on it. This is what we love to see. On the other hand, this tomato plant looks like it's doing well also, but it is a little smaller, probably because it's lacking a little more nutrition than the other plant. Still happy with this plant overall. I mean, you can't make any complaints. It's a beautiful looking plant. One thing that I'm wondering though is if it's going to slow down in production as the season progresses, because I didn't add any additional fertilizer around this plant. So as it continues to grow throughout the season and draws nutrition from the soil, I wonder if it's going to deplete the soil too much. On the other hand, this cherry bomb tomato, the one with the sardines planted underneath it, this thing should continue to excel as the season progresses along because it has that additional fertilizer underneath it. So the fish wasn't immediately available for the plant to take in because it's not bioavailable in that natural state. What has to happen is we need a bridge or an intermediary actor, like the microorganisms that are in the soil or the worms or the bacteria or whatever, to break down that fish into a way that's bioavailable for the roots to be able to take it up and this plant to drink it in. So think about that for a second. We're gonna take something, a waste, well, it could be a waste product like a fish, and we're gonna convert that into one of nature's most delicious fresh snacks right here. Tomatoes. I love doing that. And something that's so cool is we're gonna be fertilizing this plant from underneath because we buried that fish. And then if we want, we could also come around and put compost around the plant or even some additional fertilizer. So we could fertilize it from the bottom and the top from both directions. I think that's pretty unique, and I think that's a pretty cool thing about burying the fish. So again, I'm super excited to try one of these tomatoes because I took something that I don't really like that much, fish, and we got a lot of the nutrition from that fish and converted that into something that I love eating and is just so delicious, fresh cherry tomatoes. Let's try one and see if they're actually good. Let's try this cherry tomato right here. Looks beautiful. This is the one with I buried the sardines underneath. So let's see if it maybe has a little bonus flavor compared to the other one, because we'll try the other one as well. Excellent flavor. Let's try the one without sardines underneath it now. Nothing considerable. I can't say that there was like a major difference in flavor, which is not what I'm expecting. My overall verdict would be that yes, you should put sardines underneath some of your tomato plants if you already have them and stuff. This was another successful experiment, in my opinion. The tomato plant with the fish under it continued to do well late in the season as the microorganisms continued to break down that fish. That supplied some nutrition for the tomato plant, and I really think it helped. This idea was sort of inspired by the old indigenous practices for agriculture, kind of like the Three Sisters method, where they would take a fish head or a fish and bury that under their mound where they would plant like corn and beans and squash, and then that would act as like a slow release fertilizer for those plants. We did that same thing, but instead of using a fish head, I just used sardines because I had them in the house, and I just switched it up and put it under the tomato because that's like, you know, my favorite crop to grow. If you guys want to try this out, I suggest you do. Just make sure that if you do, you bury the fish like 12 to 18 inches in the soil, because if you don't, some raccoons or some critters might come and try to dig that up. I think by using a thick layer of wood chips, that might have prevented some critters from digging it up in my garden. Plus I have some pretty good fencing up, but ultimately it's definitely not worth it to go out and like buy fish in order to bury it under your plants. If you're like gonna go fishing locally and you have the extra fish heads or something, bring those home, bury them under your plants. But ultimately, it's a lot easier to just use something like a fish emulsion that you could get almost anywhere. It's cheaper, it's easier, and it's probably going to ultimately be a little more effective. These were only my 5 favorite experiments that I did when growing tomatoes, but I've actually done a lot more, and I plan on doing a lot more experiments in the future. Let me know down in the comments if there's some other experiments for tomatoes you think I should try in the garden, because ultimately, even if the experiments don't work, I find them to be incredibly fun and also incredibly beneficial to the garden. Here's why. Because these experiments get me so excited, I'm always going out there like literally every day or every other day to check up on the experiments, to see how they're doing, to see how the plants are growing. When I come out to check on the experiments, I also go around and can check my garden to see how that's growing. Coming out more often lets me see if issues arise, I can get to them quick. If bugs are going after my plants, I can grab a spray. Or if anything else happens, I'm just spending more time in the garden, which ultimately leads to a healthier garden that grows better and produces bigger harvests. That's today's video, growers. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you got something out of it. I hope you try your hand at some of these experiments, or ones that are completely different than the ones I've done before. Every time I've done an experiment, I've always seemed to get some really nice nuggets of information out of it. Maybe it's a greater understanding of how a plant grows, or maybe it's just like a little light bulb that goes off that helps me realize, oh, that's why I've had issues with my other tomato plants, or oh man, that made a big difference. Maybe I should just alter how I do things in the future. So I found all of them to be beneficial. I found it to be an incredible amount of fun, and it's just a blast all around. It's a relatively humid day today. We just had some rains. As you can see, the plants are really growing well now that the weather is setting up nicely for us. I mean, the level of production that's already coming out of this garden is something to behold. I've been grabbing harvests. Soon we'll come around and give you guys more of a tour now that things seem to be almost doubling in size every other day. It's really just incredible, and it's one of the reasons I love gardening. The effort that you put in, you always get so much more back. I want to mention that you guys gotta go over to teamgrow.us and join the community. Yes, over at Team Grow we have the best gardening products where you can grab raised beds, covers, fertilizers, and anything else you can think of. But we also have an incredible community with over 1,500 members where we're all coming together, pooling our research, our knowledge, our information, sharing it with one another so we can benefit the whole team, all grow more food. That's the idea. When we're doing this, we're sharing our garden, then other people are sharing it, and it's just becoming this compounding thing, and together we're all growing a better future. So I want to thank you for that. I also want to send a thank you to one of our new channel members, Shirley Byrne. Thanks for being a part of Team Grow. Thanks for having your hand in everything we're doing out here. I had a blast with this video. If you guys found value in it, please share it with your friends and hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. All those things help. I'm also going to add a few clips of Tuck at the end of the video here, just so you guys could see him running around in the garden. He's always been the heart, and he's still with us here in spirit, and through all the videos, he lives on forever. So we just wanted to thank you guys for your continued support for Tuck, for the channel, and we'll catch you on another one real soon. We out.